Alright, let's get this started. Give people a few minutes to start to show up. Hey Wes, how's everybody's Friday going? Hey Brian, we're going to chill for about 5 more minutes just to give everybody time to show up so they know what's going on. We've got a couple, we've got some production value on this stream now. I've got some slides, it's going to be good. Hey Andrew, glad you made it. Wes is asking why are we using YouTube whenever people are making live streaming on Dat. One step at a time, man. One step at a time. Actually, the app we're going to be building right now, I think it's going to be about the zen of simplicity here. We're going to make the most sort of straightforward kind of peer-to-peer application so that we can really just not have to think too hard about it. quick poll. Should I keep the music going once we get into the actual stream, or do y'all want me to mute it once I get going? Hey Laurel, hey Zach. Welcome to the stream. Giving folks a few more minutes to join. As long as it's good music. Alright, well, I guess that means I can't play my 90s playlist. Hey Paul, welcome to the stream. We'll wait just 2 more minutes and then we'll get this going. Alright, I think that's probably enough time. What do you say we get into this? So, got some slides we're going to go through. Let's see. First of all, hello stream. Today we're going to be making a DAT application using Vanilla.js, the DAT modules, or the DAT APIs, and no servers at all. So we're going to be starting totally from scratch. I've got some code that I wrote earlier that I'm going to be working from, so I'm going to recreate all that code. And then we're going to maybe even implement a few new features that I haven't written already in the past. So first, let's make sure everybody on the stream knows what we're dealing with, what Beaker is. Beaker is a peer-to-peer web browser, which means that you can have your browser talk to other people's browsers directly. And so there's this new URL, what you call a URL scheme, called the DAT URL. And that's the kind of technology we use. It's called the DAT protocol. And that lets you serve websites right off your computer, and then other people can visit. And when they visit, you can see in your peer count everybody that visits. And then you can actually help each other host their website. So you can visit a site and say, hey, I really like this site. I want to contribute some bandwidth. And so you could become one of the hosts as well. In fact, you automatically help host for a few minutes. But you can do that permanently too. So if you've ever used BitTorrent, it works a lot like that. Everybody can give back bandwidth and help keep the websites online when they like them. So this is an example of the sort of application we've been able to build using DAT on the peer-to-peer browser. And this is like a little Twitter clone that we made. And that's a pretty cool app, but it's complex. For today, we're going to try to go totally from scratch and just use the APIs in their simplest form so that you can get a good sense of what it's like to build using this technology. So, a couple of links to check out. If you want to download the browser, go to beakerbrowser.com. We got a download link there. If you want to see that application that I was just looking at, this one right here, you can go to fritter.hashbase.io. Once you've got Beaker downloaded, you can check it out there. And then, of course, if you want to support our development on Beaker, we take donations at Open Collective, so go to opencollective.com/Beaker. We really appreciate the support. That is the way that we have been doing all this work. Our main source of revenue is off of Open Collective. It's support of the community. Thank you all so much for doing it. So feel free to join. And if you want these links, check the description of the stream, and you can find all those links there. All right, so let's get started on today's project. we're going to make a web portal today. We're kicking it really old school here. So it's going to be a list of links that are worth checking out. Decided to make this because people need a way to discover content on DAT, and we haven't really found a great way to do that. You download the browser, the Beaker browser, and you open it up. Okay, well, now I need to find some content. Well, why don't we solve that? Let's make a web portal, like the old school Yahoo days. So it'll look something like this, right? Just Paul's portal, and then a list of links worth checking out, all put there by Paul, right? Almost kind of like Hacker News, but none of the voting or anything like that. Or sort of like Reddit, no voting. It's just I'm choosing the list. But we're going to put a twist on it. We're going to put in our portal a web ring too, so that other people can create their own portals, and then you can combine, sort of merge together the portals using the APIs. So that's going to be the twist. So this is what the web ring kind of conceptually looks like. You got Paul's portal at the top. That's mine. Whenever you land on the page, you're looking at Paul's portal. But then I'll have, 4 or 5 people, maybe more. They have their own portals, and I like what they make, so I bring them in. And then whenever you look at my page, you'll actually see their content on there as well. So that listing will be the links in my portal combined with all of the links inside my web ring, one hop out. And then if we want to, we could even get even trickier, where if each of those portals that I have in my web ring, maybe they have their own web rings. So then you could go 2 hops out and say even people further out in that network are being combined together on this portal. So that's what we're going to sort of play around with, see how it goes. We're putting some constraints on the project today, which is we're not going to use any servers. We're not going to use any NPM modules. We're just going to use web APIs and the Dat APIs and vanilla JavaScript. Keep it as simple as possible. Our #1 rule when we work on this app on the live stream, do the simplest thing possible. If I'm sitting there and thinking, I'm not really sure if I got the right idea for how to model the data or anything like that, I'm just going to say, forget it. We're just going to do the simplest thing possible. That'll keep things nice and easy, keep it moving. And in a way, it kind of forces us to keep the application simple. Because if we're not ever going to write any code that feels complex, then if there's a feature that's just too much work, then we're just not going to have it. We're just going to keep this app nice and simple. And if it goes well, I think we'll keep on working on this app in successive live streams, so we can keep developing it as a group. So, all right, let's get this started. And I'm going to open up Beaker here. Where's my slideshow? Let's change up the music a little. All right. So, starting from scratch, here I'm on Beaker, the most recent release, version 080 pre-release 6. We're going to start from absolute scratch, so I'm going to hit the new button here, and this is prompting us to choose a template to get started. I'm going to choose the website template, just to get a little bit of the files made for us. All right, and now we're inside of the management tool, what we call the library, inside of Beaker. And this is kind of like, it's almost like a Git repository, right? You can see all your files, and you can control the settings for the site and things like that. So let's call this Paul's Portal. And let's choose a fav icon for it. Always got to choose a good fav icon. Oh, man, I feel like it's going to have to be, let's do the home icon, right? Because you're using a portal. It's going to be the first place you go to every day. It's basically the home on the web, right? Old school. And then we're going to set a local directory. All right, so a local directory will be a file on my computer that, as I work, the Beaker will sync with that folder, so that I can work inside of Sublime, which is my preferred text editor, just right on my file system, and then it'll automatically publish to that site. So okay, I'm going to hit this, and I'm going to choose that directory. Created that directory for me. Good. All right, we're all set up now. And if I go to the website, we got our template done for us, right? So this is the template that Beaker put in for me when I chose to make a website. Just a little, helpful starting point. So I'm going to jump back to the library. I'm going to copy the path to the to the working directory, open it up in Sublime, and here is our page. So, first things first, let's get rid of all the stuff we don't need. I'm going to turn on live reloading because that is helpful whenever I'm working. And let's get rid of all this. So let's get this all portal. Save it. Automatically refreshes as you would expect for a live reload, and there we go. First step done. All right. Now let me get this out of the way. All right. Now I'm going to use ES modules because we can, and ES modules are really cool. So I'm going to set type module on the script. And actually, why don't we rename this to? No, let's just leave it script.js. It works. Clear out all that. Make sure it's all working. Document.body.append child. Well, we'll do this. Yep, script is getting run. That's good. Styles, let's leave it. Kind of a weird blue color, but hey, why not? Hey, Jeffrey, thanks for joining us. Don't forget, everybody, if you have any questions while we're going, feel free to say so in the chat. I'll take a pause, answer your questions. So, we're going to do this, again, like I said, totally vanilla JS. And so, I'm going to pull up my old code to make sure I know what I'm doing here. Totally vanilla JS. And there's some interesting features in vanilla JS nowadays that weren't around even just a little bit ago. So the first one is a templating tag. And what's interesting about a templating tag is that it gives you tools to basically create DOM elements really quickly off of the template. So like, let's do an example real quick. And then inside of the template, we're just going to put a div with some strong text, hi from the template, right? Now, whenever we render the page, this template isn't going to show up. So there it refreshes. Now let's get rid of that script action. All right, it refreshes, and that template's not showing up, right? Even though it's right there in the page, before the template, and then I'll show after the template. But on the page, that template does not show up, right? Should be right there, but you don't see it. Great, okay, so we can stick template HTML in there. So how do we make use of that? Well, let's put a little space, called the target, and we're going to go into our script, and we're going to copy the content out of the template and stick it into the target. So, first you grab the template element, and we call that example template, and then we're going to clone the content of it. And you do that using this import node tool, and you call it on the content attribute of the template. Specify true there, and now we have this new element. So I'm going to take our target, and I'm going to append the new element to it, and when we refresh, if I did it right, hide from the template, right? So we just copied over content from the template, and we can do this multiple times. So we should see 4 of them now. Boom. Really simple, right? So then if you wanted to change any of the content inside the template, because of course you need dynamic content, you could take the new element and then do like a query selector inside of it for the strong element inside and say maybe let's change the text content to last one. And then it changes, right? So this is a really fast and easy way to generate DOM elements without having to use any kind of templating library or anything like that. Again, we're going totally vanilla on this thing. So we still get to have a nice, easy to look at template to work from. And then whenever we're inside of the code, the actual rendering of the template looks something like this. Now, I was joking on Twitter about this the other day. The vanilla APIs are always a little bit more verbose than you want them to be. Like query selector, that, you know, you don't have to write that every time, right? So let's write some utilities for ourselves. Alrighty, so first things first, you gotta write a sugar for the query selector that looks like jQuery. Of course, you gotta do this. So we're gonna do a $sign, and the normal way you might think to do this is actually really straightforward. You just do document.querySelector with the cell, right? And we have ES modules, so we get to do this, and this is just my favorite. And so I could now replace these query selector calls with the $sign, and if we're lucky, I hit save, and it breaks. All right, what went wrong? 404 not found. Oh, right. I'm too used to Node. You actually have to include the extension. Try it again. Yes! All right. So, cool. That's step one. Now, that's the simple approach to the selector. But I think actually there's another use case that we ought to handle, which is it's pretty common that you'll want to be able to do a query selector on a existing element, like right here. And in that case, what I really want to be able to do is something like this, where I'm saying do the query selector, but instead of doing it on the document, do it on this element. So it's pretty easy to write for that case. We're just going to use some default arguments here. So if the selector is given, then we know that two parameters were passed in, both the element and the selector were given. So we'll do return el.querySelector SEL. If the type of the second parameter is not a string, if it's undefined, then we can assume that the first parameter is actually the SEL. If you're not familiar with this sort of pattern, this is pretty common in JavaScript for basically overloading the usage of a method. So usage number 1, 2 parameters put in, usage number 2, 1 parameter put in. And this way, we're getting both usages, so now I can get rid of this. And didn't work. What do we got? Aha. There we go. All right. So sugar number 1 is done. And that'll make our coding a little bit cleaner, right? It's already better. But of course, if we're going to be doing all these document.import nodes, well, we need a sugar for that too. So let's just make that, I don't know, clone maybe? Or, well, let me see what, refer to my code over here. Yeah, we'll call that clone. So then all of these could just be simplified down to template EL. Is clone the right word for that? Maybe it ought to be like render template, clone template. Well, we'll just go with clone for now. All right. So we're off to the races on a pretty basic rendering tool set. All right, I've got a question here. You could make the function in util.js a ternary, correct? Yes, you could. So somebody in the stream was pointing out another way we can write this function is like this. This is what you call a ternary condition. And it's nice to use sometimes because you can get the conditional written down in one line. So that is completely equivalent. And then technically, because we've got this on a one-liner, we could even write it like this. So that's even more kind of compact, that way of doing it. But sometimes I actually go for slightly more expanded code forms pretty frequently. I actually try to stay away from one-liners unless I think they improve the readability of it significantly, and this is getting pretty long. So I'm going to stick with the original definition. But good call, you definitely can use a ternary for that kind of a definition. All right, so got our rendering. Now, what we are trying to build might be best if we just mocked it up so we could get a look at it. So we've got a links list that we want to put out there. Let's get started on sort of mocking out the HTML for that. We got a links list item. I'm going to refer to my code from before so I can be nice and efficient with this. All right. So I'm going to basically steal from Reddit and Hacker News in terms of how I lay this out, because I always find those easy to read from. So why don't we put a number on one side, and then we'll have the content next to that, and then the content will be 2 rows, with the first row being the link that you're going to click on, and then the second row is going to be things like the date that it was posted, and then we'll do where the link's origin comes from, so like the domain. We'll call that domain, actually. And okay, there we go, right? So fake title here, let's say like, let's just do the Beaker browser website, and then the href would be, well, of course, we got to use our own protocol, so beakerbrowser.com on the DAT protocol. And then let's say if we posted this today, and the domain is beakerbrowser.com. We can get rid of this, and I'll render, and this should look like a hot mess. And of course, all of our JavaScript broke, so why don't we comment this out for now. All right. Okay, so let's copy that a couple times so that we can see what we're aiming for. So let's just pretend those are 3 different links. I'll give them different numbers real fast, 2 and 3. So this is the markup that we're going to put out. But we don't have any styles yet, so we need to style that up. I'm going to use a relatively new kind of CSS called FlexGrid. Or not FlexGrid, Flexbox. So we got our links list item, and we're going to put display flex on it and give it a little padding, and we should immediately see an improvement. And let's improve on the spacing a little bit. List item. Let's give that a width of 20 pixels, and then let's just color that domain. That domain. Let's give that like a kind of gray color using the alpha channel, and that might make it a little easier to look at. Okay, sweet. That was pretty easy, right? We used the flex so that the numbers would be positioned over there, and then 2 rows on each item. Alright, so what next? Okay, we got our markup done, we got our styling done. That's right, that's done for today. That's how this is going to look. So now we need to get some dynamic rendering going, because it would be sure, we could just make a static site where we just put all of our stuff into HTML, but I cannot imagine copying and pasting all this HTML every time. So we need to make this a little bit easier for me to maintain. We need to be separating our data from our presentation logic. That's like a good old-fashioned rule about how you make any sort of website or web application. So first things first, let's make it so that we can just render these things dynamically instead of putting them in the HTML. So to do that, I'm going to take our markup and put it in, of course, a template. Links list item template. And I'm going to take out all the content that I put in there, so we'll take out all the href, and we'll take out all the actual text nodes. Nice and clean. And then we'll jump over we'll grab our template and we'll clear out that links list, so now it's ready to be added to. Links list append child clone and links list item template, and we should see absolutely nothing because we got to set the content inside of that template. So, all right, let's make ourselves a function. Render link, or let's call it add link to page. Let's say data. We'll do actually this. We'll do index link data. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to clone that template to be our new element. And now we need to populate that element with the data and link data. And so we're going to call add link to page, and we'll say it's the first link. And then we'll say we need to have a title, so Beaker browser, and we need a href, so this would be dat beakerbrowser.com, and we need a date, so we'll set that to be, let's just write today for now. And so now I'm going to use our query selector to select DOM elements inside of our newly minted template. So first step, we use the clone function and we'll get a DOM element that looks just like this. And then I'm going to use the query selector to select elements inside of the item to populate with content. So if I want to set the index, for instance, I want to put a number inside of this element. So the way I'll do that is by using the selector on our newly created element. I'll type .index. Remember, this is basically doing l.querySelector.index. The exact same thing. And then I want to set the text content to be index, toString, right? That number that's being passed in. So we'll just do it that way first. Should just see a number 1. What happened there? Any bugs? Interesting. Where's my script? Oh, that's weird. Why do I not see the JavaScript? Do I have a... Ah, that's why. I did not close that template element, and it was stealing my script tag. Alright, closer. Gotta make sure you close the parentheses. Hey, there it is. There's a 1. Alright. I actually want a period after that 1, so let's use a template string. A period. Boom. Alright, so this is the pattern we're going to use a bunch. So for the link, for instance, we're going to do a selector on the link. Let me pull up my source code here. Link. And I want the text content of the link to be the title of the link data. So we'll do link data.title. And we should see, there's the title. All right. But we want this to be a clickable link, so we should also set the href attribute. All right. And now it's a link. All right. Pretty simple. And we want to set the title too, because that's just good accessibility. Yeah, there will be more. Brian is pointing out, it's good to see that everybody makes mistakes. There will be a lot more where that came from. All right, so there's the title attribute on it. And we got a couple more to fill out, but we should see the title now if I mouse over. There it is, cool. And why don't we go ahead and employ our sugar, because sugar is nice. So equivalent code right there, just with our nice helper. What else we got? We need to set the date. And alright, so for now we're just going to set the domain to the actual full href, but then we'll parse it in a second so that we can get something a little more concise. Link is not defined. You know, why don't we just call that link? Boom! Dynamic rendering. And I can prove it by adding a few more function calls. Super easy. Yes, it's true, Wes. Sugar is bad for your teeth. Alright. But great for my code. So, we got dynamic rendering. Good deal. What next? Well, first of all, why don't we go ahead and fix up how we do the date rendering? Because there's no way we want to actually just have to write today, yesterday, whatever. We don't want to update that every time. We actually want to give it a date and then have it compute dynamically how long ago it was. And I prefer to have it say something like 5 days ago as opposed to saying, you know, something like January 5th. At least if it's within like 14 days. So let's write ourselves a quick little days ago function. First of all, we need to put in a date format, and JavaScript actually has pretty good date parsing already in it. So I can put into this something like, what is today, June 14th? June 15th. June 15, 2018, and for experimentation, I'll give those two older dates. And then what you can do is just do new date around those. And if I do like to, let's see, if I just do get time, that gets the, I think, the number of milliseconds in the time, so we should actually get to see, make sure that, yep, correctly parsed, or it parsed something. Let's do toLocale date string, and make sure that it actually did parse correctly. Right, the 15th, the 15th, the 14th, and the 13th. So we have valid date objects, probably with the hours and minutes set to, like, you know, the first minute, or the 0 of the day. So now let's write a time ago, or days ago method. And this days ago method will take in the date. And alright, pretty straightforward way to write one of these things. This is not the best way to do it, but it certainly works. We're going to do get the current day, and then we're going to calculate how many days have passed since the date that was passed in. So we will get rid of any rounding, and we're going to do, yeah, okay, for safety, we're going to take the absolute value in case we happen to get a date that's in the future for some reason, and then we're going to do today minus d.getTime. So that's the difference of time, and then we are going to divide it by the number of milliseconds in a day. And we can calculate that pretty easily using a nice little constant. So there are 1,000 milliseconds in a second, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. That's the number of milliseconds in a day. So we now have the number of days that passed since today and the time that was given. Great. If the response is just 1, let's just say return yesterday. If it was greater than 1, actually, if it was greater than 14, let's just return the date string. So that, in that case, you know, you really just want to, like, if it's more than 14 days ago, I don't want to have it say it was 500 days ago. I just want to know what day it was at that point. If it was 0, I want it to say today. And then for everything else, let's just have it say, pretty straightforward. Save it, and how'd it go? There you go. Today, yesterday, and 2 days ago. Okay, have we done everything we need to? I think we have. It's time to get into some Dat APIs. So, we've done basically everything we need to for our presentation. We've got a nice little portal renderer, but now we need to actually have the data come from somewhere. And I think the simplest way to do this is to just make a JSON file that lives on my own website, and I could just read the JSON file and use that to populate the page. So let's make, it's going to look like this, right? This is our data structure right here. So let's create a new file, and we'll just call it, let's call it portal.json. And it'll just be an array of these sorts of objects. And I gotta use the correct encoding for JSON, so you need to use double quotes, and everything's got to be quoted. And let's just make sure there's a couple of them. Alright, so from within our script, we need to get rid of some of this old stuff. We'll keep this reference, that's handy. And let's write a setup function. Or how about this? Let's call it onPageLoad, which we will call right away. We just need to be lifted into some asynchronous code here. And I'm going to create a new DAT archive. So if you've been sort of half listening, because you're just not that interested in how DOM rendering works or whatever, but you are interested in DAT and how to make interface with the DAT protocol and the DAT network, now's the time to pay attention, because we're going to get into some of the DAT APIs. So I'm going to create a DAT archive instance for the page that we're on. And if I do console.log await archive.readDir, so this is going to list all the files of the site that we are currently on. If you look in the console, there it is. There's the, let's see, there's our util.js, right, that I made earlier, index.html, the portal.json, it's all there. So because this is a DAT site, we're able to use the DAT APIs on it, and basically the DAT protocol, at least the part of the DAT protocol we're using, it's just like a file system. The websites, the DAT websites, they're all just basically bundles of files. We call it an archive of files. So if you look inside of this internal explorer here, again, this sort of reflects that. We're looking at the URL for my site is this big long string A9B8BC. So now we're looking at A9B8BC inside of Beaker's library, and you're seeing all the files here, and here's the scripts that I'm working on, right? And you can do this for any site that you land on inside of DAT, because again, it's all just files. So on account of that, we can also use these APIs, and let me just go ahead and make a instance inside of the command line here, or inside of the DevTools, so we can explore a little more. Let's see, did they do top level await in DevTools yet? Not yet, alright. So if I do, let's do read file of index.html, and you could read the index.html, right? Just by calling this API, returns a promise, and then you can look at what the data is. Pretty fucking handy, right? Excuse my language. So let's take a look at portal.json. There it is, right? All right, sweet. That is our data store. That is where we're going to be storing the data that we render on the portal. So let's jump back into our code, and let's just grab that portal.json raw archive.readFile portal.json. Great. Oh wait, got to make sure you await it. And then we want to just parse that. Yeah, I'll try to keep the language clean. Alright, parse that JSON, and then really it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to iterate these things and call add link to page on every one. And if we're lucky, fingers crossed, Oh man, that is not right. Alright, what happened here? Let's see. Let's first make sure that the content parsed correctly. Yeah, looks like it. Okay, so that all looks right. So portal.forEach. Right, I reversed my arguments here. Portal.forEach calls a function. It gives the object first and the index second. So I had those reversed. There we go. All right. So this is great, except that the portal first link really needs to start with 1. And since JavaScript, of course, is 0-based indexing, we just need to jump over here and increment this guy. And I don't think we need that explicit toString. All right, Wes Todd forced me to stay honest. He's asking, where's the error handling for these dangerous actions? The whole page will crash if that data is corrupt. It's very true, and we can prove it by corrupting the data on purpose. What should we do? First of all, before we get into error handling, let's just take a moment to enjoy what we have here. Dynamically rendering the page, pulling from JSON. That's pretty fun. We're basically made it to stage 1 of the project. Give ourselves a round of applause. All right, now we have to get into the error handling. What happens if something has gone terribly wrong, like there is a missing quotation? Well, Wes is right. Oh, it broke. And how do we choose to deal with that? Honestly, if our main data source is corrupt, we're in a bit of a pickle on that. And I think the best we could do is just tell the user very clearly what happened. So, I think maybe, let's see, why don't we put something like a error. Let's put a global error container, and then let's use another template. Now, we could just move this into here. All right. Got some good suggestions from Wes about how we should message this sort of thing. Let's do something, well, we can just do like this, and then is there a method to just clear out all children? It's like a remove all children, maybe? Let's find out. So one way that there's a handy way to just get a DOM element directly into your DevTools command line. If you click on the element and see the elements panel, go back to the console and then do $0. $0 will refer to whatever you have selected in the elements. This is handy whenever you want to explore the API, the DOM API, because it's got the autocomplete. So like remove child. All right, they can't remove child. Is there like a remove all children or empty? I guess that means I need to use MDN to find out. If anybody in the chat knows, feel free to give me a hint. Well, from 2010, that's not really the best. Yeah, somebody's suggesting you just said enter HTML to an empty string, which is what I did, and I guess if, good enough. Yeah, Westdot is also suggesting just while there's a child, keep removing the child. We'll rock out with this. They're both about the same, I suppose. All right, so EL to blow it up. There ought to be something like that. All right, so we're using promises. We're also using JSON.parse. If either of these fail, they throw an exception, which is great. So we'll just do a try-catch around the entire bit, and then if there is an error, we'll pass it in there and see how that goes. It's probably going to be a little bit too much jargon. So we ought to say something a little more clear about how that has failed. How about something like, I mean, Wes is saying inner HTML is worse. I suppose there's a performance argument, right? Is that what you're getting at there? Not really sure which one is worse because, you know, going one by one versus does it trigger a relayout every time? I don't know. I would have to actually get in there and try it myself. So let's do a few styles. Color obviously got to be red. Why don't we give it a little padding, like 6 pixels, and give it a red border. And then let's give it a background, which is like an RGBA of fully red, but like that. How's that look? Woo! Looking good. You know, that's really anxiety producing, even if the color wasn't terrible. Well, that's what we're rolling with. I guess we could put a, you know, let's make it a little softer. We don't need to be hitting people with these with these hard edges. There we go, right? That's a little less threatening. But that's enough of these errors. Let's get that quote back in there. Okay, here we are. We made it to our first step, which is to have a portal. I suppose one thing I need to do still is get it so that we pull the domain out as opposed to showing the full URL. Let's also get some more example URLs in there. I had a portal from earlier that I was using. Cool. Better example, a little more realistic looking. Now let's get these domains parsed. This is actually pretty straightforward because the native URL method is understood. Let's also move some of these functions. So like, let's move this days ago into the another module. Clean things up a little bit, you know. Okay, wait a minute. So Wes is in the chat pointing out that inner HTML is dangerous. It is if you are not careful with it. The way that it could be dangerous is if you gave any sort of input that you don't trust, you're basically just setting HTML on the page that, yeah, could be dangerous. If you're just clearing it out with an empty string, that's not a problem. But notice in every single one of these things, I'm using text content, not inner HTML. Text content is safe to use to put data in there. Inner HTML is not. Inner HTML lets you put in a tag. And let me show you what happens if you try to use a tag inside of text content. This should be bold. Now you would think this will be bold because I'm setting it inside the strong tag, but if you look on the page here, it just shows the actual brackets. It's not making the HTML take effect. And that's important because that means that I can put in input that I don't trust there. It's not going to end up putting HTML on the page. Real important to always use text content or something like it whenever you are rendering untrusted content, which is the case with all these portal items, especially once we get the web ring started. Alright. Anything else? You know, I suppose if we're being real good in modular, we'd want another script for rendering. We'll call it UI.js, why not? And we'll just move all this into here. I mean, if we got the ES modules, we should use them. That just seems obvious to me. If anybody's curious, we've been listening to Wolfpack for the past, most of the time, actually. One of my favorites. Alright, we still rendering, we're still good? We are good. Great. Like I said, step 1 is complete. Now let's get this web ring going. Well, we've gotten to the end of all the code that I wrote ahead of time, so now I have to kind of give this half of a thought. While I'm thinking about this, I'll put out any questions anybody has. Feel free to ask now. And we can get through a little bit of Q&A. But we've got some really basic file reading. Off the DAP network, rendering content dynamically to the page. Pretty cool stuff. So I'm going to think for a moment about how I'm going to handle the web ring. And then we can get going again. Let's call it a 5. I could use some more coffee anyway. So be right back. Talk amongst yourselves.
What have you sown? What have you done with
All right. Got a couple of questions here. Andrew Chu asks, I feel like I should know this, but for the for each call and the on-page load, does it implicitly pass in the key values as arguments to the function? So for each, you pass it a function, and it is given at least the element value and then the element index that you can work with. So if you have an array of A, B, C, then successively element value will be A, then B, then C, whereas element index will successively be 0 and 1 and 2. Does that make sense, Andrew? So when we call portal.forEach, that's what's getting passed into add link to page, and so you can see on add link to page, there's the link object, and then there's the index. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get you pronouncing your name right, but I'll go with Renard. Renard asks, is 080 a breaking change from 0711? Auto update didn't automatically install it. Yeah, auto update hasn't automatically installed it because we're still in pre-release mode. So like we have been trying to nail down some kind of key pieces before we go ahead and have everybody make the move. And so it's a breaking change in that the experience is pretty different. We've redone a lot of the UIs, hopefully all for the better. But if you've been using 0711, you're going to be in for a pretty different experience. One of the biggest changes we made is we got rid of what we call the staging area. So now whenever you set a local folder, as I did at the beginning of this project, I set this folder down here, it automatically just synchronizes the files into the DAT, right? Because every DAT has an internal storage that you actually use on the network. And what Beaker does, it says, okay, we'll take that internal storage and synchronize it to a folder for you. And then you can work inside that folder, and automatically we will pull those changes into the internal structure so that it's on the network. So every time I save like index.html, that gets written to the file system. Beaker is watching the file, so they catch that event. It does a diff between the local folder and the internal data and says, oh, there's a change to index.html. It reads that and then writes it into the DAT itself. And then the live reloading gets triggered by that write, and the page automatically refreshes. Pretty crazy sequence of events there. But if you click on this thing right here, you can see a history, and these are all the history of changes as we've gone. And actually, fun fact, if you click on these things, you can actually go back in time. And we're still trying to figure out exactly the right approach to this because it's a little bit too much space usage right now. But like, if we want to go back and look at an old version of script.js, we can go back to version 28, and that's where it was at version 28, right? And we make a new version every time we make a change. So it's really more like revision 28. But it's neat because, yeah, not only can you go back in time in the library, but you can actually go back in time when you're browsing. So check this out. If I go back to revision 28, here it is way back in, you know, who knows, 45 minutes ago, ancient times. So you can just iterate through the successive versions of what we've been doing. Handy little feature. Don't talk about that too much yet because we're still figuring out exactly how the versioning should work. We really need to have, instead of just these revision numbers, we need to have something that's like version 1.0.0, something like that, that you can tag explicitly. And we have to decide when Beaker saves the historic data or gets rid of it, because we're keeping a copy of every file version you make. So it's a little bit it's way too much data usage right now. But it is a neat feature. We're just got to kind of nail down the UX of it as well as the trade-offs for the storage. Yeah, Joshua, sorry for the surprise about losing the staging. The commit and revert, there's some pretty lengthy issues inside of GitHub where we talked about the pros and cons of the staging area. We originally put it in there for a reason. It had some pretty good effects, like it was useful. But we kept running into these weird cases where, like, well, basically, anytime a DAT site would write to itself, it was writing directly to the published version. So then you would get into the situation where the UI was saying, hey, do you want to revert this change because the DAT had changed, but your alleged source of truth, which is your staging area, had not been synced up with that change. It was kind of a nightmare. So we really just decided to get rid of that, and what we're going to do is make it so that you can create a draft version of the DAT, and so it's almost like you can temporarily create a staging version. You'll see, it's in progress right now. So we'll get back to the ability to sort of do temporary work and then publish when you're ready, but for now it's just automatically syncing to the DAT. Simpler, simpler, simpler. That's what we have found every time. Just go for the simplest possible thing. Alright, so I think that handles all the questions. I did not figure out how I'm going to do the web portals, so I'm going to go with my rule of thumb, which is just do the simplest thing possible. I'm going to make a webring.json. And this will be an array as well, and it's going to just be a list of objects. And it'll be name, let's go with Alice. And URL, I'm going to have to come up with a new URL. Why don't we first just use myself? We'll just get really self-referential here. Alice, Bob, and Carla. So the goal here is, first of all, we want to show who's in the web ring. So we'll render that. And then on top of that, we want to set up the portal, which is this file listing, to actually merge together links created by everybody else. And you can think of it as a graph where I'm at the center with my portal, and then you expand one hop out on the graph. That's the sort of social group of the web ring. So we'll pull in their data, and then we can actually go multiple hops out if we wanted to. So we're just going to rock and roll and see how it goes. First, we're going to camel case this because that's the more JS-y way to do things. And you know, I suppose if we wanted to like, I suppose we could do like, what is it, document dot. What is that event? I don't know if we need to do that. We'll just call the function. So let's get some globals involved here. Because everybody knows globals are the best, right? So, is that right? And we're going to do async function read portal. Actually, let's have read portal be passed in an archive. And then we're going to take this and... Oh, but we do want to keep it inside the try catch. All right, let's add another function to read the web ring. Should work pretty much the same way. Let's make these things. So in addition to reading the web ring, we're going to need to add some rendering functions for the web ring. We'll define that in the UI.js, and it'll work exactly, more or less, the same as the others. So this is, again, we're just doing the same stuff we did before, creating some template elements, getting a rendering function in there. This isn't super exciting, really. Just something that's got to get done. This will get much more interesting once we start to do the friend of a friend expansion, which I'm sure will be real easy, and I'm not worried about it at all. And yeah, I think we just need an... we should probably, yeah, that's fine. Just an anchor. We'll give it a class. And div ID is web ring. That's where we'll add them to. And then save here, and then the UI, we just need to do set attribute href web ring member.url, and the text content of the link needs to be set to their name. And that, I believe, is that. And we actually should be rendering now. Oh, interesting. What the heck is that? Ah, called read portal twice. Read a web ring. Great. There's that very cool web ring, which is really just me. And then let's get to the styles real quick. And we'll just use the flexbox again. And let's add a little padding on each one. Good deal, and of course we need a header on that, so let's do, you know, H2 WebRing. Doesn't get much better than that, right? We are just crushing modern website design. So, alright, we got the WebRing rendered. If I click on any of these, it'll take me right back to myself, because I'm actually just using my own URL for the moment. And let's get that WebRing expansion in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually get this function to read a portal. Probably just going to have this return the portal now. Same with the WebRing. Let's get the So we only need to pull the WebRing once for myself and render that. So that's straightforward. Let's do that. Andrew Chu is saying it would be cool to have a feature that visualizes the WebRing somehow. That's a good idea. Maybe we'll do that on a future future live stream. So, really, what we need to do, I think, yeah, okay, so we're going to read, let's change this to read portal links real quick, and then we're going to create a function called read portal. And basically, we could do this recursively and make the number of hops configurable based on that. So, is recursive the, yeah. So, we'll call it read, yeah, we'll just call it read portal. And we're going to pass in an archive and a depth and a max depth. We're going to set the max depth to 0 by default, as well as the depth. Actually, let's reverse those. And every portal you want to render, you want to fetch the WebRing at least. And then you're going to want to fetch the portal. I gotta give this some thought. Eventually we're going to return these things. But then, if the depth is still less than the max depth, we're going to recurse on the WebRing. Apologies, I'm kind of thinking this through as I write here, so I'll go back and explain what I'm thinking in more detail in a moment. So we're going to go through each WebRing member, and we're going to call the read portal function on them. And then we're going to just let's see. On each one of these, why don't we set the origin? Let's just call archive. Okay, I think we need to pass in actually something about the name. And then we're just going to concatenate the links. Okay, I think this should work. I think what we should see is like all of the, nope, didn't work. All right, so what I'm thinking here is we need to have a function that operates on every possible portal that you read from. And on each one, you're going to read the web ring from that portal, and you're also going to read the links from that portal. We're going to attach some information about where the link came from. So we'll attach the archive that it came from. We'll also attach the name as the web ring was given to them. So I start with Paul, and then later on when we read from my web ring, we'll have the name Alice and the name Bob and the name Carla. This will all be attached to the link object. Then we're going to recursively look to see if we are have reached our limit depth. So for instance, if I set the max depth to 1, then we start at depth 0. That needs to increment. And if we haven't reached our target maximum depth, we're going to iterate the web ring. We're going to wait, use a promise.all await. So this is kind of a unique construction here, and I'll explain this in a moment. But this basically, I guess I'll explain it now. We're going to iterate every entry in the web ring using the map function. So usually a map function is used on arrays to sort of transform the array. So if I have 1, 2, 3.map, and I did like v plus 1, then R2 would end up being 2, 3, 4, right? So it's a way to take each element and return a new value for the element, and you get a new array with these new values. Whenever you're dealing with an array of elements and you want to, oh, you know what? I can probably do this. You know what? I'll use a simpler construct, and that'll make this nicer. We'll do this. This trick does work, but for simplicity, we'll just use a good old-fashioned for loop. And so then we're going to, on each one of them, let's change these to let, so that they're scoped correctly. We'll create a Dat archive for the web ring member. Then we call read portal, and this is our recursion here, right? Well, we're passing in the archive we created, passing in the name that the web ring gave that person, thread through the maximum depth that we want to go down, and then we increment the depth, right? And that will return a set of links, right? So then I'm going to concatenate together the links in each parent, and eventually what will happen is at the very top I'll have the web ring, which is just my personal web ring, but the links list will be the links from everybody. You know what? Why don't we also put the link let's do web ring name and web ring depth. Let's put the depth on each one too, because we could do some fun ranking functions this way. Okay, so this is all great except it doesn't work. So let's find out why. Oh no, there it goes. Hey, it works. Cool. Okay, so if I add another sort of hop out on the expansion, if I set that max depth to 2 instead of just 1, we should end up with, let me think, we went from 1 to 5 iterations, right? So that's, let me see, each has, oh brother, I have to do some math in my head. First of all, I've got 3 links, I've got 3 people here, so that took us from, we got my original ones here. We can make this easier. Let's add to each one of these rendered. Let's add to each one of these rendered items who it came from. So inside of UI, we're going to set a new text content. We're going to set the origin. And we're going to set that to the web ring name. All right, now we should see who it came from. Awesome. Okay, so these 3 come from me. Then Alice adds these 3. Bob adds those 3. And Carl adds those 3. So that's one expansion out, right? We started with these 3 links. They're actually, Alice, Bob, and Carla are actually just me. I'm just using that as test data. So it's kind of like recursing on itself 3 times to get us a total from going from the original 3. Now there's 4 total renderings of those links to have a total of 12. If I add the expansion one more time, we get into a big explosion, which I'm guessing, I guess it's like a factorial? I don't know. My math is not that great. Well, let's just do it the hacker way and just do it. Yeah, boom, right? So like our FOAF expansion, friend of a friend expansion, worked correctly. We're traversing out this graph. And if I set it to 0, we should just get my original portal. Simple. Okay, so because it's configurable now, first of all, I'm going to just pause real quick, ask the stream, does everybody understand what just happened? Do you understand why the data is changing based on that depth? Do you understand the nature of the recursive algorithm? Happy to go through it again in a little more detail because I was having to think while I was writing it the first time. If not, if everybody's on the same page, we can keep going. But I think what we really ought to do, since it's configurable, is make it so that you can just control it right in the page. So let's do, yeah, let's just stick it in right here. All right, folks are responding, which is good. I will respond to your questions in just a moment. Okay, Joshua Meir says, got the algorithm, but do we want the same link appearing multiple times on the page? I'm too young to be familiar with WebRings. No, we are totally breaking away from how WebRings have historically worked. Historically, a WebRing would just be a set of links to people that have their own personal website. So it comes from like the days of our playlist cycle. It comes from the days of like GeoCities and stuff like that. Whenever you would make a cool website and you wanted to share it, you would stick it on GeoCities, and then you would basically link out to your friends. So what I'm doing is sort of using the WebRing, but then automatically pulling data out of that WebRing so that you can see more information. So let me just use this. No, this will give me. Andrew, you asked to see the WebRing.json again. Here it is. It's just a name and a URL for everyone. So just to make sure this is clear, you got Paul with his set of links, right? And then Paul has a set of friends, which is Alice, Bob, and Carla. This is my WebRing. And each of them, they have their own links. And so what I'm doing is saying you could just take my links, or you could take Paul plus Alice plus Bob plus Carla, join them all together, and now you get 4 people's links all added in. So now, as the person that's at the root of this, I can add and remove people to and from my WebRing, and they will have their content added to and from my page automatically, so the people that visit my site get more to look at. So not only is it a portal, but it's a portal where I'm able to delegate some of the curation to people by adding them and removing them from my WebRing, right? So we're really messing around with the classic idea of a portal and a WebRing by saying, okay, yeah, this is like old school Web 1.0 stuff, but now we're going to pull in these Dat archive APIs so that we can make it a little more interesting. Andrew asks, thanks. So everybody in the WebRing would need to have a portal.json to read, right? And that is correct. As long as, the way that we've written this right now, as long as you have a portal.json and a WebRing.json, actually, you probably don't even need the WebRing. We could ignore it if you didn't have one. But you got to have a portal.json to add links. Now, we probably don't want to set global errors if any of that fails, because now that it's not just me in control of things, I probably just want to log that to the console and ignore it, because it's entirely possible that at some point Carla deletes her portal.json. I don't want that to break for everybody else. So why don't we just ignore, we'll do a console.error. And then we're going to just return an empty array. We should also log which archive it was. And then if the total number of links comes out 0, then we'll put an error on the page. Okay, now let's take advantage of this configurable hops control. Don't know how y'all like your beer. I prefer to have a few hops, but not too much. Load data. Zach says, in regard to hops, would we not see 2 hops in this example yet, as that would require Alice, Bob, and Charles each have their own webring.json of different friends. So, this webring that I've created is phony. It's all referring to my site, and I'm just giving different names to my site by doing this. So what's happening is that if I do 2 hops, you actually end up seeing pulling in my own webring yet again. So technically, I could expand forever. We have an endless sort of cyclical loop in our webring, and it will continue to add Alice, Bob, and Carla. In a minute, I'll create some other portal sites that we can actually pull from and have a better looking data set. Let's get this hops configuration working correctly. $sign not defined. Alright, that's looking correct. Alright. Let's make a config.js and we'll do export function. Change hops. And we'll do export function get hops. Yeah, it's called set hops. And let's store our configuration on local storage so that it persists over page loads. So pretty straightforward here. Barely deserves its own file. How sweet is it to have ES modules just natively in there? That is fun. Alright, so if I set it to 2 and refresh, we should get 2 hops. But we need to set the control. Pretty straightforward. I think I can just do this. Let's take a look. Yeah. So let's set it to 3 and watch the chaos. Great. Totally working. Now, it's not going to be nearly this fast whenever we get actual... Let's make it so it refreshes the page when you change that. It's going to be slower whenever we actually have other people involved, whenever these are not just all the same site reading itself. But let's move the origin real quick. Let's move it over here. All right. Better. And let's set one hop to be the default. And there we go. Okay. I guess the next thing to do is to create another data set to work from. Now here's the kind of fun thing about how Beaker and the DAT network end up working out. You can actually duplicate any DAT site that you visit. So if you just go up to the page menu and you hit make editable copy, I can just clone this entire thing. I'm going to do that, and we're going to call it Alice's portal. Alright, so now we're on Alice's portal. I'm not going to set a local directory for this one. Looks just the same, because it's not pulling any information. Why don't we fix that, actually? I'll fix that in a second. Okay, but now we got another data set to work from. We got Alice. Copied all the files, so exact same website, just a different address now. I guess I say exact same, but if I make changes to my website, it will not change hers. And if I jump over to Alice's portal, and let's change up a few things for her. First of all, let's get rid of everybody in her web ring. We'll use the in-browser editor for this. And then for her portal.json, let's change up some of these links. Anybody got some favorite links we should stick in here? Alright, June 15, and let's do... And... Alice is a little basic. Maybe doesn't realize everybody already knows about Twitter and Google. It's cool. We won't judge you, Alice. Alright, there's Alice's portal. Let's go back to my portal. Alright, now we're seeing a little bit more realistic data set, right? Now, I'm not happy about how Alice's portal calls itself Paul's portal. That's messed up. So why don't we change that real fast? Every DAT site has a title, which is why whenever I am in the library, I look at the title. I want to, you can actually pull that information using JavaScript, and so I'm going to change it so that this and then the actual page title are pulled dynamically from the page, from the DAT itself. So we're going to do it like, first of all, let's get rid of the defaults. And then, well, we'll just call it portal. And then we will get that archive info and do document title. Let's archive info.title and page title.text content equals archive info.title. Now we'll be getting the dynamically rendering pages. Page title, okay, right. And that means we need to update Alice's to work the same way. And we'll just do that the old-fashioned way. Jumping over to her code and just copying and pasting. Renard asks if Beaker browser supports extensions. We do not. Just one too many tasks to get extensions in, so no extension support. There we go. Dynamically pulling the title. Less confusing. So now, Paul's portal, if I click on Alice, takes me right over to Alice's portal. That's interesting. Paul. Why does that say Paul? Right. Okay. We'll deal with that later. So, I guess the last thing we ought to do is we ought to get a ranking function in here, because it's kind of messed up that even though Alice posted something today, my stuff is all on top. And maybe I'd like to give priority to my own stuff, and we can get a more sophisticated ranking function later. But for the moment, definitely want to put the most recent stuff at the top. So let's get that done. Which means we probably need to go ahead and parse the dates straight away. And then in our UI, we don't want to do that anymore. Then we need to have a ranking function. So we got there, let's see right here, we do links.sort A and B, and we're just going to do b.date.getTime minus a.date.getTime, and this will just put the most recent first if I remember things correctly. We lost our live reloading. There we go. Now it's getting ranked by day, and I guess if they're equal, we could do something like ranking it by the number of hops out. So why don't we do that? If it's equal, we can do b dot, and we put this thing right here, which was web ring depth. If B is closer than A, then we'll go with B, otherwise we go with A. I think I got that right. Yeah, so if I reverse that, Alice should jump above me. Correct. Alright, but we don't want that. Great. Okay, there we have it. We got a portal with the web ring twist. And now I can start to share stuff about what's going on in the world, and I can bring on other people with their own site. So when I'm done, I'm probably going to upload this to something like probably portal-puphrasy.hashbase.io. That's probably where I'll put this. So then if you visit this, you should be able to fork it. By fork it, I mean you go to the site, you click this drop down here and hit make editable copy, and then you got your own portal. And then you can send it to me, and then I'll add it to my web ring, and we'll start to get a really sweet sort of daily listing of links. It's really straightforward right now because it's just that portal.json list of links. We don't have any way. You got to edit that thing manually if you want to control what links are there. You can remove links, you can add links. I don't know, maybe we'll change how that works. Like I said, we're just going for as simple as possible, and we'll keep on sort of building on this as we go. Something else that's totally missing here is, let's say you do go to this site and you decide you want to make your own portal. I have no way of finding out about it unless you get in touch with me, you know, using like IRC or something like that to send me your link. Wouldn't it be nice if when somebody else made a portal, I could get a list like, hey, other portals that are in the community, and maybe we'll be able to come up with a solution for that in the near term. We got some new APIs coming along, so maybe we'll try that out sometime, a couple weeks. But we will definitely have another live stream in a week, and before I sign off, I'll answer any other questions. So, we got one already. Think about your questions. I could probably spend another 20 minutes hanging around if anybody wants to ask them. Zach is asking, would it be possible to make changes to files in a new forked archive upon forking? Like when Alice forks Paul's portal, the web ring and portal.json in this new archive could be reset. It's a really good idea, and not currently. One of the reasons, I mean, one thing you got to consider is like there's a little bit of a risk because you could think that you're copying and getting one thing, but then the site could like change what you're getting right whenever you do the copy, and suddenly you've got something different. So that's one thing to consider. But probably the biggest thing is just that would require some kind of API or specification that I just don't have done yet. Don't know how that would work, and it adds complexity to the entire thing. And we want the design of these APIs to definitely be palatable to the web platform in general. So anytime we add something new, we have to really think like, okay, is this something that we can imagine being a part of the web platform someday? And if not, we tend not to do it. So we have to kind of think carefully. So probably what I'm going to do is, in the next version, I might set it up so that you can make a portal without using the built-in make a copy, but instead we might pull out the data from the application, so that rather than self-modifying, everybody visits the portal site and then they have their own portal profile that's kind of disconnected from the tube. But I'll think about it. It is kind of nice to just be able to read and write the data directly to yourself. But basically what this means is that this UI, right, the rendering and the data are bound together in this one website. the portal.json live in the same site as the index.html and all the scripts and stuff like that. And so, you know, it's kind of like we still have data and presentation bound together, especially because, you know, Alice's portal, she copied from me, but like if I make any changes to the interface, it's not going to update her thing. She completely is disconnected from my, what you might call my upstream. So there's pros and cons to these approaches, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll mess around with it a little bit. Andrew says this reminds him of Secure Scuttlebutt a little bit. Andrew, I think you probably know this, but maybe you don't. But I was involved in Secure Scuttlebutt prior to working on Beaker and Dat. So this is in a lot of ways. I'm just trying to take some of the stuff I learned from the awesome folks at Secure Scuttlebutt in that community and applying it to the web a little bit more. I'll tell you what really reminded me of Secure Scuttlebutt was writing Fritter, because Fritter is basically the same application as Patchwork, but on the Dat network. And so I was, having done that before in Secure Scuttlebutt, it was interesting to do it again on Dat and kind of see how the experience had changed that time around. This is a new interface right here. If anybody else has questions, definitely got time to answer them. Moritz asks, are there any plans regarding a permissions API, especially to give other users write permissions? Real quick, you bet, Andrew. Moritz, so yes, and there's permissions has a couple of different meanings. There's first of all whether or not an application is allowed to access your data. And then there's the question of giving other people the ability to read and write data that you created. You bet, Julian, thanks for joining us. So we have already the controls for whether or not a DAT is allowed to modify, or a site is allowed to modify your data. It automatically is allowed whenever the site is modifying itself. But if you are using something like Fritter, actually, Fritter separates the application from the profile site. So if I go to Fritter and click up on this sort of thing right here, you can see it has permission to write to my profile site. And that's a totally different website. See this right here? This right here is my profile site where I've got all my data. But so like the Fritter website has been given permission to write to it. That should be yes. I wonder why that was checked off. So that's permissions for applications. Permissions for other people. That requires some updates to the Dat protocol, which we're calling multi-writer. And that is in the works, which I hope will launch maybe by the end of summer. And that'll make it possible for you to say to other people, hey, you can now make changes to this Dat archive if you like. But that just takes a little bit of time, and we want to make sure we get it right. So probably end of summer, maybe early fall. I guess I should pull up my, let's see. Gotta close it out with the fancy slide. Like I was saying before, if you like the work we're doing, please check out our Open Collective. We are completely supported by donations, so your support really matters. We appreciate it. Just head to opencollective.com/Beaker. Yeah, multi-writer is going to be really interesting. It's going to come with a couple of cool features. not only will we have the ability for multiple people to work on a DAT archive, so work on files together, but we're also going to get a new API that it's like a website, like a DAT site, but it's a key value store. So then you can have DAT sites that are files, have a set of files inside them, and then you can have DAT sites that are almost like a level DB, a bunch of key values, which should be really interesting and maybe change how we build applications where anytime you've got user data, you write it into that key value store as opposed to saving it as JSON files. But we got to figure that out. It's one step at a time. You bet, Zach. Thanks for joining. Well, I think we're going to just call that a day. Really great doing this with everybody. We'll be doing another one in exactly 1 week, same time. So I hope to see you then. I'll have to cook up some new features for us to implement together. So have a good weekend, and feel free to reach out to us on Twitter or IRC. We're pretty much always online. So everybody, have a good one.